The doctor said she was 5 minutes away from death. Her skin was the color of marble, her pulse a fading ghost. Inside the gilded halls of Ashbourne Manor, the champagne flowed, the violins wept, and her own family laughed, warming themselves by a roaring fire, having left her to die in a snowbank 3 miles back. They thought she was a loose end they had finally cut. They thought the Duke was just a rich prize to be won. What they didn't know was that the Duke hadn't thrown this ball to find a wife. He threw it to find her, and he was about to bring hell to their doorstep. Derbyshire, England, December 18th, 1884. The mirror did not lie, but Genevieve wished it would. She tugged violently at the corset strings, her breath hitching in a sharp gasp. "Tighter, you stupid girl, tighter!" Genevieve shrieked, her reflection distorting with rage. "If I cannot breathe, then the waist is small enough. If I am gasping, then the Duke will notice me." Behind her, fingers trembling and raw from the cold of the unheated attic room, Isolde Fairchild pulled the laces. The rough fabric bit into her palms, but she did not complain. Complaints in the Sterling household were met with the back of a hairbrush or a week without supper. Isolde, at 19, had learned the art of invisibility. She was the ghost of Blackwood Manor, the orphaned niece, the inconvenience, the stain on Lady Beatrice Sterling's perfect social record. "That will do." Lady Beatrice swept into the room, a vision in emerald silk that cost more than the annual wages of the entire downstairs staff. She looked at her daughter, Genevieve, and nodded in approval, completely ignoring the girl who was practically holding Genevieve together. "You look magnificent. The Duke of Ashbourne will not be able to look away." "He has a reputation, Mother," Genevieve said, preening. "They say Lord Silas Hawthorne is a beast, that he threw the Earl of Kent out of a window for insulting his horse. He is a duke, Genevieve," Beatrice snapped, adjusting a diamond pin in her daughter's hair. "He could throw the Queen out of a window and still be the most eligible bachelor in England. We need this alliance. Your father's gambling debts are substantial. If you do not secure a proposal, or at least a courtship, by spring we lose the manor." Isolde stepped back, her hands stinging. She kept her eyes on the floorboards. She knew about the debts. She knew that the fortune her father, Thomas Fairchild, had left her had been managed into non-existence by Aunt Beatrice after Thomas's death. Isolde was supposed to be an heiress. Instead, she was a seamstress with a pedigree. "And what of her?" Genevieve pointed a manicured finger at Isolde. "Is she staying in the attic? I don't want her creeping about while we are gone." Beatrice turned her cold grey eyes upon her niece. "Isolde is coming with us." Isolde's head snapped up, shock breaking through her mask of indifference. "Aunt Beatrice?" "Don't look so hopeful, child," Beatrice sneered. The invitation from the Duke was addressed to the Sterling family and household. It was specific, peculiarly specific. He requested the presence of all residents. "If we leave you, and he asks, however unlikely that is, it looks improper. We appear uncharitable." "But I have nothing to wear," Isolde whispered. Her current dress was a grey woolen thing, patched at the elbows. "You will wear the maid's spare cloak and sit in the carriage jump seat until we arrive," Beatrice commanded. "Once we are at Ashbourne Hall, you will enter through the servants' entrance and stay in the cloakroom. You are there to hold Genevieve's smelling salts and fix her hem if she tears it dancing. Do not speak to anyone. Do not look at anyone, especially not the Duke. Do you understand?" "Yes, Aunt Beatrice." The journey began at twilight. The winter of 1884 was recorded as one of the harshest in Derbyshire's history. The air was not just cold, it was predatory. It sought out gaps in clothing and bit down on the skin like iron teeth. The Sterling carriage was a grand enclosed landau, lined with velvet and heated by copper warming pans beneath the floor. Beatrice, Genevieve, and her younger, equally vapid sister, Rosalind, sat inside, wrapped in furs, gossiping about the night ahead. Isolde sat outside. The jump seat Beatrice had mentioned was not the interior folding seat. It was the groom's bench at the rear, exposed to the elements. The carriage driver, a sympathetic old man named Old Thomas, had tried to protest, but Beatrice had threatened to dismiss him without a reference. "Here, lass," Thomas had whispered, pressing a horse blanket into Isolde's hands before they departed. "Keep your head down. The wind is wicked tonight." As the carriage rumbled down the long, winding road towards the Ashbourne estate, the snow began to fall. It started as gentle flakes, picturesque and soft. But within an hour, the wind turned. A blizzard, sudden and violent, roared down from the peaks. Isolde huddled under the horse blanket, her teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. The wind cut through the thin wool of her dress. Her fingers were already numb. She watched the warm, golden glow of the carriage lamps swaying in front of her, a cruel reminder of the warmth just a few feet away. Warmth she was forbidden from sharing. 3 miles from Ashbourne Hall, disaster struck. The carriage hit a patch of black ice hidden beneath the fresh powder. The wheels locked. The vehicle skidded violently to the left, slamming into a stone mile marker with a sickening crunch. The rear axle groaned and snapped. Isolde was thrown from the back bench, landing hard in a snowdrift. The world spun. Pain shot through her ankle. She heard screaming from inside the carriage. "My dress! My hair!" Genevieve was shrieking. Isolde dragged herself up, favouring her injured leg. Old Thomas was already checking the horses. "Wheels done for, my lady," he shouted over the howling wind. "We can't ride on it." Beatrice kicked the carriage door open, her face twisted in fury. "We are going to be late. The Grand March starts at 8. "We have to unhitch the horses," Thomas yelled. "You can ride them, or we wait for help. But help might not come for hours in this storm." "Ride?" Rosalind cried. "In this dress?" "We are close," Beatrice calculated, looking at the distant lights of Ashbourne Hall, glimmering through the storm like a beacon. "Thomas, unhitch the horses. Genevieve, you take the grey. Rosalind, the bay. I will take the leader. Thomas, you will carry the bags." "What about Isolde?" Thomas asked, gesturing to the girl shivering violently in the snow. Beatrice looked at Isolde. She saw the girl's blue lips, the way she favoured her left leg. A horse could only carry one rider safely in this ice. There were 3 horses, 4 women. Beatrice made her choice instantly. It wasn't a choice born of necessity. It was born of malice. "She can walk," Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the wind. "My lady, it's 3 miles uphill," Thomas argued, horrified. "Her ankle looks turned. She'll freeze before she makes the gate. She is young and sturdy," Beatrice lied, mounting the horse with surprising agility. "The exercise will warm her. Besides, look at her. She is a mess. She cannot be seen arriving with us. Isolde, follow the tracks. When you arrive, go to the stables." "Aunt, please," Isolde gasped, the cold already making her speech slur. I can't feel my feet." "Then walk faster," Genevieve laughed, looking down from her mount. "Don't be such a burden, Isolde. It's truly unbecoming." Or without a backward glance, the 3 women kicked their horses into motion. Old Thomas looked at Isolde with tears in his eyes. "I'll send help back, lass, I promise. As soon as I get them to the door, I'm coming back with a cart." "Go, Thomas," Beatrice screamed from the darkness. He ran after them. Isolde was alone. The silence of the snow was deafening. The cold was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest. She took a step and cried out as her ankle gave way. She fell into the powder, the white swallowing her. "I am going to die here," she thought, a strange calmness washing over her. "I am going to become part of the winter." She forced herself up. 1 step. 2. The lights of the Ashbourne estate were so beautiful. They looked like stars, but they were so far away. Ashbourne Hall, the grand ballroom. The Duke of Ashbourne, Lord Silas Hawthorne, hated parties. He hated the noise, he hated the sycophancy, and he particularly hated the way mothers looked at him as if he were a prime cut of beef at a market stall. He stood on the balcony overlooking his own ballroom, a glass of amber whiskey in his hand. At 32, Silas was a man etched from granite and shadows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as black as a raven's wing, and eyes that were a startling, piercing blue, eyes that missed nothing. "You look like you're plotting a murder, Your Grace," a voice drawled beside him. Silas didn't turn. He knew the voice. It was Dr. Julian Vance, his personal physician and only friend. "I am contemplating it," Silas murmured, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the air. "Who invited these people, Julian?" "You did," Julian reminded him, sipping his own drink. "Or rather, your steward did, under your strict instructions. Invite every noble family within a 50-mile radius. Make it imperative." Julian paused, studying the Duke's profile. "You're looking for someone, Silas. You've been looking for someone for 6 months, ever since you returned from the campaign in the Crimea." Silas gripped the railing. "I am not looking for someone. I am looking for a ghost." "The girl from the letters?" Silas stiffened. During the war, while lying in a field hospital, delirious with fever, a volunteer nurse had read to him. She had written letters for him when his hands were too bandaged to hold a pen. She had never told him her full name, only that she was from Derbyshire, an orphan living in the shadow of a black wood. He had never seen her face clearly. His eyes had been bandaged for weeks due to shrapnel dust. But he knew her voice. He knew her spirit. She was the only thing that had kept him tethered to the earth when he wanted to let go. When he recovered his sight, she was gone. Sent back to England. "She is here," Silas said, scanning the sea of colourful gowns below. "I feel it." "The Sterling family has just arrived," the steward announced, bowing low as he entered the balcony. "Lady Beatrice Sterling and her daughters." Silas's head snapped up. Sterling. That was the name of the family that owned the estate bordering the Blackwood. "Bring them to me," Silas commanded. "Immediately." 10 minutes later, Lady Beatrice and her daughters were ushered into a private parlour off the main ballroom. They were flushed, their hair wind-blown, but artfully arranged to look like a style choice. They looked triumphant. When Silas entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop. He did not bow. He did not smile. He walked with the predatory grace of a wolf, circling trapped prey. "Your Grace," Beatrice curtsied low, her daughters following suit. "We are honoured, truly honoured, and our deepest apologies for our appearance. Our carriage suffered a terrible accident in the storm." "An accident?" Silas asked, his eyes sweeping over them. 3 women, and everyone is accounted for." "Oh yes, thank heavens," Beatrice sighed, placing a hand on her chest. "Just myself, Genevieve, and Rosalind. And our driver, of course." Silas frowned. "My invitation was specific, Lady Beatrice. It addressed the entire household." Beatrice didn't blink. She was a master of the social lie. "Regrettably, my niece. She is of a delicate constitution. She took ill quite suddenly this morning. A fever. We thought it best she stay behind to rest." "What is her name?" Silas asked softly. "Isolde," Genevieve piped up, stepping forward and fluttering her lashes. "Poor plain Isolde. She really isn't fit for such grand events, Your Grace. She is simple-minded." Silas went still. Isolde. The name hit him like a physical blow. "Read it back to me, Isolde," he had whispered in the hospital tent. "My dearest brother, I am alive," she had read, her voice melodic and soothing amidst the screams of the dying. "Simple-minded," Silas repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is that so?" "Tragically," Beatrice added. "But let us not dampen the evening with talk of poor relations. Genevieve has been practicing the pianoforte just for—" The door to the parlour banged open. It wasn't a servant. It was Dr. Julian Vance, and he looked pale. "Silas," Julian said, ignoring the women. "You need to come to the entrance hall, now." "What is it?" "The driver of the Sterling carriage," Julian said, glaring at Beatrice with open disgust. "He just collapsed in the kitchens. He was frostbitten and hysterical. He was rambling about a girl. Beatrice's face drained of colour. He said they left her, Julian continued, his voice rising. He said they left a girl named Isolde 3 miles back at the mile marker, in the blizzard. She has a broken ankle. The silence that followed was absolute. Silas slowly turned his head to look at Beatrice. The wolf was no longer circling. The wolf was about to strike. "You left her?" Silas whispered. The rage radiating from him was so potent that Rosalind whimpered and stepped back. "In this storm?" She insisted," Beatrice stammered, her composure shattering. "She wanted to walk. It was only a few miles." "It is 20 degrees below freezing," Silas roared, the sound echoing off the walls. "Get out of my sight! Guards!" 2 uniformed men appeared instantly at the door. "Lock these women in this room. If they attempt to leave, shackle them." "Your Grace, you cannot!" Beatrice shrieked. "If she is dead," Silas leaned in close, his blue eyes burning with a terrifying fire, "I will dismantle your life, brick by brick. I will see you destitute. I will see you rot." He spun on his heel, his cape swirling around him. "Julian, get the medical bag. Get the sleds. Get the horses." "Silas, the storm is a whiteout," Julian warned, running to keep up with the Duke's long strides. "You can't ride in this." Silas didn't stop. He threw open the heavy oak doors of the manor, facing the wall of white snow and howling wind. He didn't feel the cold. He only felt the burning terror in his gut. "I am not riding," Silas growled, grabbing a lantern from a startled footman. "I am running, and if the snow has taken her, I will burn the snow itself." He plunged into the dark, into the biting frost, screaming her name into the wind. "Isolde!" But the only answer was the howl of the storm. The Blackwood Forest, 9:15 p.m. The cold was no longer a sensation. It was a lullaby. Isolde lay curled in the hollow of a frozen oak tree, her body half buried in the drift. The excruciating pain in her fingers and toes had vanished 20 minutes ago, replaced by a strange, terrifying warmth. She felt as though she were floating in a bath of hot water, smelling lavender and honey. "It is time to sleep," a voice whispered in her mind. "Just close your eyes. The carriage will be back in the morning." She knew, in the deepest recesses of her fading mind, that this was the end. The paradoxical undressing, the final trick the mind plays before freezing to death, tempted her to tear off her thin cloak, but her arms were too heavy to move. Her eyelashes were frozen together. Her breath was a shallow, ragged rattle that barely misted the air. She thought of her father. She thought of the letter she had read to the blind soldier in the hospital tent, the soldier with the voice like thunder and velvet. "Don't let go," the soldier had told her then. "Read it again." "I can't," she whispered, the sound lost in the shrieking wind. 300 yards away, Silas Hawthorne was fighting a war against nature. He had abandoned the lantern. The wind had extinguished it within minutes. He was tracking by instinct now, and by the faint, disturbed grooves in the snow that the storm hadn't yet fully erased. He moved like a man possessed, his heavy fur-lined coat weighing him down, but he didn't stop. "Isolde!" His voice was raw. The snow blinded him, lashing his face with ice crystals that cut like glass. Every shadow looked like a body. Every fallen branch looked like an arm. Dr. Benedict, who had followed on a sturdy plough horse, shouted over the gale, "Your Grace, the tracks are gone. We must turn back. You will die out here too." "Go back if you wish, Benedict," Silas roared, turning to face the darkness. "I am not leaving her." He pushed forward, wading through waist-deep drifts, his heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, terrified rhythm. He had faced cannon fire. He had faced cavalry charges. But he had never felt fear like this. The fear of a world without her in it. Then he saw it. A flash of color that didn't belong. It wasn't the white of the snow or the black of the trees. It was the dull, lifeless gray of cheap wool. It was a small mound at the base of an oak tree. Silas stopped. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. Please, God, let her be sleeping. He lunged forward, falling to his knees in the snow, digging frantically with his bare hands. He brushed away the powder and revealed her face. Isolde was blue, not pale, but the color of bruised porcelain. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted slightly. Ice had formed on her eyelashes and in the hollow of her throat. "No," Silas choked out, ripping off his gloves. He pressed his hands to her cheeks. They were as cold as the stone mile marker she had crashed into. "No, no, no, Isolde, look at me." He pressed his ear to her chest. Silence. Then a flutter. Faint, irregular, as soft as a moth's wing against a window pane. "Benedict!" Silas screamed, the sound tearing from his throat with primal desperation. "She's alive! Bring the blankets! Now!" He didn't wait. Silas tore open his heavy coat, then his waistcoat, exposing the warmth of his own chest. He pulled her frozen, rigid body against him, wrapping his coat around both of them, trying to force his own life force into her. He buried his face in her icy, wet hair. "I have you," he whispered fiercely, rocking her. "I have you. You are not allowed to leave. You are not allowed to die on me. Do you hear me? I searched the world for you." Dr. Benedict arrived, sliding off the horse with a heavy medical bag. He took one look at the girl's complexion, and his face grimaced. "Hypothermia, stage 3, Benedict diagnosed grimly, checking her pupils. "She is in a metabolic icebox, Silas. If we warm her too fast, her heart will stop. If we don't warm her fast enough, her heart will stop." "Tell me what to do," Silas commanded, lifting Isolde into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "We need to get her to the manor, but not to the fire. We need tepid water, friction, and we need to pray." Silas mounted the plough horse, holding Isolde across the saddle in front of him, shielding her from the wind with his own body. He looked down at her still face, rage and love warring in his heart. He looked back toward the road where the Sterlings had ridden away. "Hold on, Isolde," he whispered into the storm, "and God have mercy on them, because I will not." Ashbourne Hall, 10 p.m. The ball was in full swing. The orchestra was playing a lively Strauss waltz. Champagne flutes clinked, and laughter rippled through the warm, golden air of the ballroom. Lady Beatrice Sterling stood near the punch bowl, holding court. She had managed to fix her hair and pinch some colour into her cheeks. She was currently recounting a fabricated version of their journey to the Countess of Harrington. "It was terrifying, truly," Beatrice said, placing a hand on her chest. "The carriage nearly went over a cliff. But my girls were so brave. We had to ride the horses bareback for the last mile. It was quite the adventure." "And your niece?" the Countess asked, peering through her lorgnette. The Duke seemed quite distressed about her absence. Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Isolde is difficult. She insisted on staying behind at our estate. She hates crowds. A very sullen girl. We try our best with her, but you know how it is with poor relations." Genevieve giggled, sipping her wine. "She prefers the company of the attic spiders, I think." Suddenly the music stopped. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was a discordant halt, as the cellist saw the main doors and froze. A hush swept through the room like a wave, starting near the entrance and crashing into the back of the hall. The heavy double doors, usually opened by footmen, had been kicked open. Silas Hawthorne stood there. He looked like a demon rising from the underworld. He was covered in snow, his boots leaving muddy puddles on the pristine marble floor. His hair was wild, his face pale with fury, but it was what he carried that made the room gasp. He held the limp, sodden body of a young woman in his arms. Her grey dress was soaked, her hair hanging in frozen rat tails. One of her shoeless feet dangled, purple and swollen. "Make a path!" Silas bellowed. The sound was so loud, so authoritative, that the crowd parted instantly, creating a wide corridor through the center of the ballroom. Beatrice dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the terrified silence. Silas did not look at the guests. He walked straight through the center of the room, his eyes fixed on the grand staircase. Dr. Benedict ran alongside him, shouting orders to the servants. "Hot water! Lots of it! Towels! Brandy! Clear the master bedroom!" Benedict shouted. As Silas passed the Sterling women, he stopped. He turned his head slowly. The guests held their breath. The Duke's eyes were terrifying, void of humanity, filled only with a cold, sharp judgment. "You said she was at home," Silas said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "You said she was sick." Beatrice trembled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Your Grace, we thought—" "She was 3 miles away," Silas continued, shifting Isolde's weight gently in his arms, frozen into the ice. "Because you took the horses." A collective gasp went through the aristocracy. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "They left her? In this storm?" It was a misunderstanding," Genevieve cried out, sensing the social tide turning against them. "She wanted to walk. She's crazy, I told you." Silas looked at Genevieve. "If she dies," he said, "I will have you charged with manslaughter, all of you." He turned away and stormed up the stairs, carrying his precious burden away from the vultures. The master bedroom, 11:30 p.m. The room was stiflingly hot. A roaring fire decimated the chill of the storm. Isolde lay in the center of the Duke's massive 4-poster bed, buried under mountains of down comforters. Dr. Benedict was vigorously rubbing her limbs with warm oils to stimulate circulation. A team of maids was ferrying hot water bottles. Silas sat in a chair by the bedside, still in his wet clothes, holding her hand. He hadn't let go for an hour. "Her pulse is thready," Dr. Benedict murmured, listening to her chest with a stethoscope. "But it is there. The warming pans are working. The danger now is the fever that will likely follow, and the frostbite on her toes." "Will she lose them?" Silas asked, his voice cracking. "It is too early to tell. We caught it just in time. Another 10 minutes, Silas, and we would be arranging a funeral." Silas lifted Isolde's hand to his lips. Her fingers were rough, calloused from years of sewing and scrubbing floors, evidence of the life she had been forced to live. "Who is she to you, Silas?" Benedict asked softly, wiping his hands on a towel. "I have never seen you like this. Not even during the siege of Sevastopol." Silas smoothed a damp strand of hair from Isolde's forehead. "She is the voice in the dark," Silas replied. "When I was blind, Benedict, she sat by my bed for 3 weeks. She read me poetry. She wrote letters to my mother, pretending to be me so she wouldn't worry. She saved my sanity. I never saw her face. But I know this scar on her thumb." He traced a faint white line on her hand. "She told me she got it from a sewing needle when she was 12. The angel of Scutari," Benedict realized. "You talked about her for months." "I sent investigators to every hospital in England," Silas said. "I never thought to look in the attic of my own neighbor." A knock came at the door. It was the head of security, Mr. Barrow. "Your Grace," Barrow said, looking uncomfortable. "Lady Sterling is downstairs. She is demanding to leave. She says you are holding them against their will, and that she will contact the magistrate." Silas stood up. The tenderness vanished from his face, replaced by the granite mask of the Duke. "She wants the law?" Silas asked, walking to the door. "Fine. I will give her the law." He turned to Benedict. "Keep her alive, Benedict. Do not leave this room." "Where are you going?" "To finish the party." The drawing room. Midnight. The Sterling women were not in shackles, but they might as well have been. They were seated on a sofa in the drawing room, guarded by 2 large footmen. The rest of the guests had not left. The storm was too fierce to travel, and besides, the drama unfolding was far more intoxicating than the wine. The entire party had moved into the adjacent hall, watching the spectacle through the open archway. Beatrice was pacing. "This is an outrage. I am a peeress of the realm. You cannot keep me here." "Sit down, Beatrice," Silas said, entering the room. He had changed into a fresh black suit, appearing every inch the lord of the manor. "Silas," Beatrice tried to charm him, forcing a smile. "Really, this has all been a terrible confusion. Isolde is a drama queen. She likely laid down in the snow just to get attention when she saw you coming. And look, it worked. She has ruined your lovely ball." Silas walked over to a side table and poured himself a glass of water. "Old Thomas, the driver. Is he a liar?" Beatrice blinked. "The servant? Who cares what he says? He is senile." "He is currently in my kitchen, weeping into a bowl of soup," Silas said calmly. "He told my steward that you forbade him from putting Isolde on a horse. He told me you ordered him to leave her behind." "It was a difficult decision," Beatrice snapped, her mask slipping. "We had to save ourselves. The carriage was broken." "There were 3 horses," Silas counted. 3 horses, 4 women, 1 driver. The driver stayed behind to fix the wheel. That leaves 4 women. 3 horses. Simple mathematics, Beatrice. You could have doubled up. You could have walked in shifts. Instead, you chose to leave the one person you viewed as expendable. He turned to the crowd of onlookers. He saw the Earl of Kent, the local magistrate, and the Bishop of Derby among them. "Lord Magistrate," Silas called out. A portly man stepped forward nervously. "Yes, Your Grace?" If a person knowingly abandons a dependent in a lethal environment with the intent that they do not survive, what is the legal term for that? The room went deadly silent. "Attempted murder, Your Grace," the magistrate said softly. "Or at the very least, criminal negligence causing bodily harm." Beatrice's face went white. "You wouldn't." "I have already sent a rider to the constabulary," Silas lied smoothly. The storm was too bad for a rider, but Beatrice didn't know that. "However, I am a reasonable man. I do not wish to hang my neighbors." He stepped closer to them, towering over the cowering Genevieve and Rosalind. "Here is my offer," Silas said, his voice hard. "You will leave my house the moment the storm breaks. You will never set foot on Ashbourne land again. And you will sign over the guardianship of Miss Isolde Fairchild to me, effective immediately." "Guardianship?" Beatrice sputtered. But her trust fund. Her father left a substantial—" She stopped, realizing her mistake. Silas smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. "Ah, the trust fund. The money you have been siphoning to pay for those silk dresses, to pay for Genevieve's gambling debts. Yes, I know about those too." He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. It was a piece of stationer's paper he had hastily written on upstairs. "Sign it," Silas commanded, throwing it onto the coffee table. "Grant me full legal wardship of Isolde and control of the Fairchild assets. Do it, and I won't have the magistrate arrest you tonight for attempted murder and embezzlement." Beatrice looked at the magistrate, who was looking back at her with stern disapproval. She looked at the crowd of peers who were whispering behind their fans. Her social standing was crumbling by the second. With a shaking hand, she picked up the quill. "You are stealing her," Beatrice hissed as she signed. "You threw her away," Silas replied. "I am simply picking up what you discarded." He snatched the paper back the moment the ink was wet. "Now," Silas said, pointing to the door, "get out of my sight. You will stay in the servants' quarters in the stables until the roads are clear. You are not welcome in the main house." "The stables?" Genevieve shrieked. Like animals?" "Like the way you treated her," Silas said. "Be grateful I am giving you a roof at all. Guards, remove them." As the Sterling women were escorted out, weeping and humiliated, the ballroom erupted into a low roar of conversation. Silas ignored them all. He turned back to the stairs. He had won the battle. Now, he had to win the war against death in the room upstairs. December 24th, 1884. Christmas Eve. Pain was the first thing Isolde felt. It was not the numbing, silent agony of the snow, but the prickly, burning sensation of blood returning to damaged nerves. Her feet felt as though they were being stung by 1,000 nettles. She groaned, shifting slightly. The movement caused a rustle of heavy fabric, silk, not scratchy wool. The scent of the air was different, too. It smelled of pine, wood smoke, and a faint, masculine trace of sandalwood. "Easy," a deep voice rumbled from the shadows. "Do not try to move yet." Isolde's eyes fluttered open. The room was dimly lit by the embers of a dying fire. It was a cavernous space, with high ceilings and velvet drapes pulled tight against the winter night. She was lying in a bed so large she felt lost in it. She turned her head. A man was sitting in a wing-back chair pulled close to the bedside. He looked exhausted. His cravat was undone, his dark hair falling over his forehead, and there was a shadow of stubble on his jaw. Panic seized her. Where was Aunt Beatrice? Where was the attic? She had missed her chores. She was going to be punished. "I'm sorry," she rasped, her throat dry as parchment. "I didn't mean to sleep in. I'll get the coal scuttle." She tried to sit up, but a large, warm hand gently pressed her shoulder back down against the pillows. "You will do no such thing," the man said firmly. "You are not a servant here, Isolde. You are a guest, and you are safe." Isolde blinked, her vision clearing. She looked at the man. His eyes were a startling, intense blue. She recognized him from the portraits in the village, from the whispers of the maids. "The Duke," she whispered, terror spiking in her chest. "Lord Hawthorne." "Silas," he corrected gently. He reached for a glass of water on the nightstand and held it to her lips. "Drink. Slowly." She drank, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. When he pulled the glass away, she looked at him with wide, confused eyes. "Why am I here? The last thing I remember. The snow. You almost died," Silas said, his voice tightening. "Your family left you. I brought you here." "My family?" Isolde flinched. "Aunt Beatrice will be furious. She told me to stay out of sight. I have to leave. If she finds out I am in the master bedroom—" "She knows," Silas interrupted. "And she is gone." "Gone? I evicted them," Silas said, with a satisfaction that bordered on savage. "They are no longer welcome on my land, and you are no longer their ward. You are mine." Isolde stared at him, unable to process the words. "Yours? Like a prisoner?" Silas looked pained. He set the water down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "No, Isolde, not a prisoner. My ward. My responsibility. Until you are well enough to decide what you want to do with your life, you are under my protection. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it." Isolde studied his face, the harsh lines of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. And then he shifted, rubbing his eyes with his hand. That gesture. A memory flashed in Isolde's mind. A field hospital in the Crimea, the smell of antiseptic and rot, a man with bandaged eyes, reaching out in the dark, rubbing his temples in that exact same way when the pain of the shrapnel became too much. "Read it again, please," the blind soldier would ask. Isolde's breath hitched. "Major?" she whispered. Silas froze. He lowered his hand and looked at her. "You knew?" he asked softly. I wasn't sure," Isolde stammered. "Your voice is the same, but you were a major then. And you couldn't see me." "I saw you," Silas said, tapping his chest. "I saw your heart. I saw your kindness when everyone else saw a dying soldier." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing the scar on her thumb. "I looked for you, Isolde. For 6 months. I didn't know your name. I only knew this scar, and the sound of your voice reading Keats." Tears welled in Isolde's eyes. She had thought those weeks in the hospital were a dream, a brief window where she was useful, where she was listened to, before being dragged back to the drudgery of Blackwood Manor. "I didn't think you would remember me," she said. "I'm just nobody." "You are the woman who saved my life," Silas said fiercely. "And now I am going to save yours." He stood up, towering over the bed, but his presence was protective, not threatening. "Rest now. Tomorrow is Christmas. Doctor, Benedict says if your fever stays down, you can sit by the window." "Silas?" she called out as he turned to leave. He stopped. "Yes?" "Thank you." He looked at her, and for the first time, a genuine, soft smile broke through his stoic mask. "Sleep well, Isolde." January 10th, 1885. Recovery was a slow, strange beast. Physically, Isolde was healing. Her ankle was still bound, and she walked with a cane made of polished ebony that Silas had commissioned for her, but the frostbite had not taken her toes. Dr. Benedict called it a miracle. Emotionally, however, she was still freezing. She had spent 19 years making herself small. She had learned to walk without creaking floorboards, to eat without clinking cutlery, to exist without taking up space. Now, she was the center of a bustling ducal household, and it terrified her. The maids drew her baths with scented oils. The cook sent up trays of pastries that Isolde used to only dream of smelling. The dressmaker arrived to fit her for a wardrobe of winter gowns in velvet and silk. Isolde felt like a fraud. She felt like an imposter in a play, waiting for the curtain to fall and the audience to boo her off the stage. One morning, Silas found her in the library. Ashbourne Hall's library was a cathedral of books, 2 stories high, with spiraling iron staircases and shelves that reached the painted ceiling. A fire roared in the massive hearth. Isolde was not reading. She was standing by the window, a feather duster in her hand, frantically cleaning a smudge on the glass. "What are you doing?" Isolde jumped, nearly dropping the duster. Silas stood in the doorway, dressed in riding gear, looking imposing and confused. There was a spot," Isolde stammered, hiding the duster behind her back. "The maid missed it. I didn't want you to see it." Silas walked over to her. He took the duster from her hand and set it on a table. "Isolde," he said patiently, "and we have 40 staff members. It is not your job to clean the windows. It is your job to look out of them." "I don't know how to be idle," she cried, her frustration bubbling over. "I feel useless. I eat your food, I wear your clothes. What do I give in return? I am just a burden." "A burden?" Silas laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "Isolde, come here." He led her to a large leather armchair by the fire. "Sit." She sat, feeling small in the massive chair. "Do you see that stack of correspondence on my desk?" Silas pointed to a teetering pile of letters. "That is the bane of my existence. Tenants, investments, parliamentary inquiries. My secretary is incompetent, and my handwriting is atrocious." It was true. The shrapnel injury had left a slight tremor in his right hand. "I need help," Silas said, lying through his teeth. He didn't need help. He could hire a dozen secretaries. He needed her to feel needed. "You read to me in the hospital. You wrote for me. Would you be willing to assist me with my correspondence? As a personal secretary of sorts?" Isolde's eyes lit up. "Work? Real work?" "Vital work." Silas nodded solemnly. "I cannot trust anyone else with these matters." "I have excellent penmanship," she said, straightening her spine, "and I know how to balance a ledger. Father taught me before he died." "Perfect," Silas said. "Then it is settled. You start today." And so the courtship began. It was not a courtship of flowers and sonnets, but of ink and shared silence. Every morning Isolde would limp into the library, and they would work. She organized his chaotic affairs with a ruthless efficiency that amused him. She scolded him when he ignored tenant complaints. She read the newspapers to him while he paced the room. Slowly, the ice around her heart began to crack. She learned that Silas was not the beast the village rumors painted him to be. He was serious, yes, and brooded often, but he cared deeply about his people. He had built a school for the miners' children. He had pensioned off the old soldiers from his regiment out of his own pocket. And she learned that he listened. One afternoon, while organizing a shelf, she mentioned she loved the smell of hothouse lilies. The next morning, the library was filled with vases of white lilies, imported at great expense from London. "They help with the air quality," Silas had mumbled when she asked, his ears turning pink. But the shadow of the Sterlings still lingered. Late in January, a letter arrived. Isolde was sorting the mail when she saw the handwriting. Sharp, angular script. Lady Beatrice Sterling. Her hands began to shake. The room seemed to tilt. "Isolde?" Silas looked up from his desk. He saw her pale face and was at her side in 2 strides. "What is it?" She wrote, Isolde whispered, holding out the letter as if it were a poisonous snake. Silas took it. His face hardened. He didn't open it. He walked to the fireplace and tossed it into the flames. "Silas!" Isolde gasped. "You didn't read it. What if it was important?" "Nothing she has to say is important," Silas said, watching the paper curl and blacken. "She is the past, Isolde. She has no power here." "She is my aunt," Isolde said, her voice trembling. "She has connections. She always said I was unlovable, that no one would ever want a penniless orphan with a sharp tongue." Silas turned to her. The firelight danced in his blue eyes, making them burn with intensity. "Is that what you think?" he asked, stepping closer. "That you are unlovable?" "Look at me," Isolde gestured to herself. "I am plain. I am damaged. I have nothing to offer a duke." "You are blind," Silas growled softly. He closed the distance between them. He reached out, hesitating for a moment, before cupping her face in his hands. His palms were rough, warm, and electrifying. "You are the most formidable woman I have ever met," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "You survived a blizzard. You survived that family. You brought a man back from the brink of madness in a hospital tent. Do you think I care about dowries? Do you think I care about titles?" He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Isolde stopped breathing. "I don't want a duchess, Isolde," he whispered. "I want you. I have wanted you since the moment you read Ode to a Nightingale to me while the cannons were firing." Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked up into his eyes and saw the truth there. It wasn't pity. It was hunger. It was devotion. "Silas," she breathed. He pulled back slightly, searching her eyes for permission. "May I?" She nodded, a fraction of an inch. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative, polite kiss. It was a claiming. It was the storm and the fire all at once. His arms went around her waist, pulling her flush against him, the cane clattering to the floor, forgotten. Isolde clung to his lapels, melting into him, the last of the winter chill finally being driven from her bones. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was the only thing in the world that mattered. But as they broke apart, breathless and flushed, the heavy oak doors of the library swung open. Mr. Barrow, the head of security, stood there, looking grim. "Your Grace," Barrow said urgently, "I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a problem." Silas didn't let go of Isolde. He kept one arm firmly around her waist, shielding her. "What is it, Barrow?" "It's the press, sir, and a solicitor from London." Barrow grimaced. "Lady Sterling has gone to the newspapers. She's claiming you kidnapped Miss Fairchild. She's claiming you are holding her hostage and taking advantage of her. She has demanded the public hearing to restore Isolde to her rightful, loving family." Isolde gasped, burying her face in Silas's chest. "She won't let me go. She never lets me go." Silas's expression turned to ice. The tenderness of the kiss evaporated, replaced by the ruthlessness of the soldier. "She wants a public hearing?" Silas said, his voice deadly calm. "She wants to drag this into the light?" He looked down at Isolde. "Do you trust me?" Isolde looked up. She saw the wolf again. But this time the wolf was on her side. "Yes," she said. "With my life." "Good." Silas looked back at Barrow. "Let them have their hearing. Summon the carriage. We are going to London." London, the High Court. The hearing room was packed to the rafters. Lady Beatrice had ensured the press was present, painting herself as the grieving mother figure fighting against a tyrannical aristocrat. She stood before the magistrate, clad in mourning black, dabbing dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. "He bewitched her!" Beatrice wailed, pointing a trembling finger at the empty defense bench. "He dragged her from the snow, confused and vulnerable, and turned her against her own flesh and blood. I only want my darling niece home." "Your darling niece is right here," a strong voice rang out. The doors swung open. Silas entered, looking every inch the Duke, but all eyes were on the woman beside him. Isolde was no longer the grey mouse of the attic, dressed in midnight blue velvet, walking with a cane, but with her head held high. She looked regal. She walked past her aunt without a glance and took the stand. "Miss Fairchild," the magistrate asked, "do you require protection from the Duke?" "The only person I require protection from," Isolde said, her voice clear and unwavering, "is the woman standing there." Beatrice gasped. "Isolde, how can you—" "Silence," the magistrate ordered. Silas stepped forward, placing a heavy, leather-bound ledger on the bench. "Your Honour, while Lady Sterling has been busy giving interviews, my solicitors have been busy auditing the Fairchild estate. This is the original ledger of Thomas Fairchild's trust." He opened the book. "Systematic embezzlement for 10 years, forgery of signatures, and most damning of all, a letter from the bank dated 3 days before the ball, threatening foreclosure on Sterling Manor unless a substantial sum was deposited, a sum that matches the exact remaining balance of Isolde's trust." The courtroom erupted. Beatrice froze, her face draining of all colour. "She didn't leave me in the snow by accident," Isolde said, her eyes locking with her aunt's. "She left me there because if I froze, the trust fund would default to her. She didn't want a marriage for Genevieve. She wanted a funeral for me." The magistrate looked at the evidence, then at Beatrice. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. "Lady Sterling, you are remanded into custody, pending a full criminal investigation into fraud and attempted manslaughter." As the guards moved in, and Beatrice began to scream, Silas offered his arm to Isolde. She took it, leaning her weight against him, not out of weakness, but out of partnership. "Let's go home, Isolde," he whispered. "Yes," she smiled, leaving the winter of her life behind forever. "Let's go home." And that is the story of how a cruel betrayal led to a love that melted the coldest winter. The Sterling family lost everything, their reputation, their manor, and their pride, while Isolde, the girl they tried to erase, became the Duchess of Ashbourne, loved fiercely by the man who saw her when she was invisible. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the very act meant to destroy us is the one that sets us on the path to our destiny. Isolde found her voice in the silence of the snow, and Silas found his sight in the darkness of war. If you enjoyed this tale of justice, romance, and revenge, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Share this with a friend who needs a little reminder that karma always comes around. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.